Well, welcome to our digging deeper into the book of Jeremiah.
Yeah, welcome.
My name's Sam. I'm here with Mr. Sweatman, Richard Sweatman.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a good night tonight,
Yeah, great.
looking at a bunch of stuff. How's your day been, Richard?
Oh, it's been fantastic. We painted the deck today.
You painted the deck.
Yeah. With
So you can't go on it this afternoon or this
no.
evening?
In fact, the boys did it, which is great. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was just over-supervised.
Can they come to my place?
For, you know,
A bit of coin?
it's about the money.
Did they charge you?
No.
No.
Family.
Freebie. It's not who you know. It's not what you know. It's who you know, isn't it?
That's right, Sam.
And Richard, I noticed you're in need of a haircut.
Yeah, I've got a bit of COVID hair going here.
Bit of COVID hair
a
going on.
bit wavy, yeah.
And the boys gave you a recommendation for a hairstyle.
Yeah, recommending the man bun. So I don't think it's quite there yet, but yeah, unless hairdressers open up, that could be on the cards.
On the cards. I'm looking forward to that. Richard Sweatman with a man bun. How good would that be?
How about you, Sam? How's your day?
It's been a very busy day today.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a little bit of time off. So, you know, when you're in the lead up to holidays, everything's always busier. You're just trying to jam as much stuff as you possibly can into. So that's been my day. So bit busy.
Yeah, if you've got any ministry tasks for Sam, just put them in the YouTube chat there.
That's right.
Try and
I'll
get to them before.
promptly ignore them. Promptly ignore them. Now, what we're going to do tonight is Richard's going to give us a bit of a breakdown of Jeremiah. So go through the broad structure of the book of Jeremiah. Think about some of the themes, some of the history behind it. And so why don't I hand over you? You can kick off with the themes of Jeremiah.
I'll start talking, but you should contribute as well because you've done
I'll
much
jump
work
in
as me.
bits and pieces.
So we thought we might use the map, draw a bit of a map to start with so we get a bit orientated. So, because Jeremiah is a big book, anything you can do to help you get orientated is going to be good. So let's just put it on the map here. We've got the sort of Mediterranean Sea here, and we've got the little region of Judah and capital city Jerusalem here in Israel. And I'll just draw, that's the sea. Down here we've got Egypt and the Nile River running down there. So Egypt's a significant power. Over here on the east, we've got the two big rivers coming up, the Tigris and Euphrates. And that allows us to this is where Assyria was a power around the Tigris and the capital Nineveh.
Yep. So Assyria was the nation that came in and took Israel, the northern kingdom, into captivity.
Yeah, so this is after the divided kingdom. You've got Israel and Judah, and Assyria came in 722 BC and demolished the northern kingdom, Israel. And then over here, you've got the nation of Babylon, who is the other big power.
Yep.
And then you've just got desert here.
Yeah. And so they actually hook in from the north as well, don't they?
Yeah. So once they defeated Assyria in about 612 BC, and they came down from the north. So a lot of times in Jeremiah you hear about nations coming down from the north. That's because there's only desert here and you can't get across. So there's lots of coming down from the north.
From the north, yeah.
So if you've got this, and around here we've got Moab and Edom, and but this will cover most of the places that you read about in Jeremiah.
Great.
So let's rub that off.
All right.
Basic map.
I hope you're all able to draw along with Richard at home. Otherwise, you can just Google a map on the internet,
Google.
And it will not be as good. But
Oh, Sam, you could put. We've got a technical expert in the studio today.
Yeah, Sam, you can put You can put a map in the comments on the
from Visual Units
on the YouTube chat.
All right. So and Sam's going to tell us answers if we need them as we go through. So that's basic map. Then basic timeline. It's probably good to anchor it around the key important kings. So Jeremiah starts his teaching in the reign of Josiah. That's chapter 1.
Chapter 1, verse 2. The word of the Lord came to him in the 13th year of the reign of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah.
So Josiah, in the 13th year, that would be 627 BC.
Yep. And then
So-
it's through the reign of Jehoiakim.
Yeah. So this is long after Israel's gone and the Assyrian Empire is sort of on the way out. But significant king there, Josiah, and he was a good king, really, did a lot of reforms. And then the two main kings, we'll just skip over the other, is Jehoiakim. You'll read a lot about Jehoiakim in Jeremiah. He reigned for 11 years. And then you'll read about Zedekiah, who is the last king of Israel.
Yep.
He also reigned for 11 years.
So he was in power when the people of Judah go into exile.
Yes, that goes right to the Babylon exile. In fact, there were two rounds of exiles. One was when Jehoiakim died. That was 597,
Yep.
and that's called the first deportation. That's with Babylon going through
The deportation being
to Babylon.
taking people
taking
to
Jehoiakim
Babylon.
and the nobles and rulers, and then at 587 there was the second deportation, and this is when Jerusalem was completely
Yep.
destroyed by the Babylonians.
So politically, the Babylonian kingdom, the way that they overtook other kingdoms, was to actually take people from their nation and take them back to
Yeah,
Babylon.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get Daniel. Daniel's one of,
Daniel's in there in
you
Babylon.
know, he's deported
Yeah.
to Babylon.
Yeah, Ezekiel is out there as well. And so, yeah, you'll read in Jeremiah these three kings, but also there's a little one here, Jehoahaz, who only lasts about 3 months, and a little one here, Jehoiakim, the son of Jehoiakim. He only lasts a few months, but he is alive, and the very end of the book, you realise that he's still alive, and there's a sort of hint of the future with Jehoiakim.
Future with Jehoiakim.
Also known as Coniah. The Hebrew Bibles, everyone's got two names,
Double names.
like Sam, Hilltop, you know, all your other nicknames.
All my other nicknames.
So,
Richard, Sweat Dogs.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you'll come across Josiah and Jehoiakim and Zedekiah. And the tricky thing is in Jeremiah, the book itself, these guys will sometimes go in different orders. So you'll be reading about Jehoiakim, then you'll read about Zedekiah, then you'll jump back to Jehoiakim. So it's not strictly chronological in the second half of Jeremiah.
Of Jeremiah. So where do we read about Jehoiachin in Jeremiah?
Couple of places.
Sam,
Sam, why don't you
help
bring
us
up
out there?
Jehoiakim on the... You guys won't be able to see that, but we'll be able to see that.
Sam's our little cheat expert behind the scenes here.
Yeah.
He helps us when we don't know.
So he...
Jehoiachin, Sam. With a CH. CHIN.
I'm trying to remember where I've
Jehoiachin.
read about
There
him.
you go, Jeremiah 22.
Oh yeah, he does come
DVD.
up in the King section.
Yep. And Jeremiah chapter 24. I should know this because I've been prepping Jeremiah
fact-
22 and Jeremiah 24 just today, actually.
One of our questions from Josh, I think, was about Jehoiakim
Right.
in 22 verse 28.
Okay. Well,
how-
we'll come to that.
We'll come to that? Okay.
We'll come to that. Yeah.
All right, so remember Jehoiakim. Can I
Let's
read
keep going.
Run this
Let's. Yep.
All right, so that's the Kings. And there's more of this in my longer Digging Deeper video. Sam, can you post a link to the longer Digging Deeper video? And then lastly, we'll do a quick structure of Jeremiah.
Structure. Yep.
Okay, so the structure of Jeremiah.
I always find, Richard, once I get the structure of the book in my head,
Yeah.
you're able to feel your way into the whole.
Yeah.
Even when you kind of dig in deep to Jeremiah 15 or whatever. it might be,
Yeah, it's so helpful.
If you know where you are.
So let me know if I go off the screen here, but we've got
1 to 24.
we've got a beginning and an end. Chapter 1, chapter 52, which is nice because chapter 1, Jeremiah gets his calling. He gets called into the job. And 52, it's like, it's all over. Jerusalem's destroyed. Jehoiakim, Zedekiah's dead. Jehoiakim's sitting at the table of the king of Babylon. And then I think most people reckon Jeremiah can divide into two halves with chapter 25 as a hinge. So 1 to 24, that's what we're covering in our current preaching series. We're doing all of the first half. But if you go to 25, it's you can see it's got a hinge function of kind of reflecting back on what's happened, what's coming up, themes from the first half, themes from the second half. And it's labelled in my NIV Bible there as the 70 years letter.
Yep.
And so,
because one of the purposes of Jeremiah was it was written. Well, you've got Jeremiah preaching to those who are yet to go into captivity.
yep, definitely. Yeah.
But then you've also got this function of Jeremiah being a book that the exiles would read
yeah.
and look back and recognise, I guess, well, the purpose of it was that they would recognise their shortfallings, their sin, where they went wrong in the past. And
Yeah. He started, actually, in the second half of the book, he started sending his content over to the exiles who went round in the first deportation with Sariah, I think, about chapter 36. Anyway, get back to that. So first half, and the feature of the first half, it's very kind of personal. This is where you get Jeremiah weeping and the insights, and he's struggling. There's not so many dates or narrative. Like he just, this happened. It's not...
Judgment.
Yeah. Dates, less of that. And then in the second half, there's more dates and narrative. And it's less personal. And yeah, you... I don't know, that's a good start, those first half and second half, 1 to 25. Let's put a couple of bigger chunks, other chunks. We've also got here a large section called the Oracles Against the Nations. Abbreviate that to OAN, Oracle Against the Nations.
Yep.
That's 45 to 51, I think.
46 to 51.
46 to 51, and that's lots of prophecies and oracles against Egypt, Moab, Ammon,
Yep.
Egypt, Babylon, that sort of thing.
But there's a bit of hope built into that as well.
Yeah, even
lots
for
of
those
judgment,
nations.
but
Yep.
also hope. Yep.
We've got another key section of 31 to 32, which is the New Covenant. Oh, sorry, that's about 30 to 32. That's quite a famous passage that's quoted in Hebrew, the New Covenant.
Yep. And you see that in Hebrews chapter 8.
Yep. And then in this little gap here between 33 to 45, you've got all this Zedekiah and Jehoiakim going back and forth, different themes, Jeremiah being locked up, thrown up in jail, and that sort of thing.
It's a bit of a chasm in my knowledge, that part of Jeremiah.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a year. But
Yeah.
that's tricky because it goes by theme. You know, Jeremiah will get locked up by Jehoiakim, then he'll get locked up by Zedekiah, and kind of the theme
Keeps
of
going around,
opposition,
right?
or false prophets. And in the first half, this we're doing here in our current series, you've got sort of themes like the Jerusalem as the wife who's gone astray. You've got themes of the temple impurity. That's all that, the temple of the Lord, temple of the Lord.
Temple of the Lord, chapter 7. Yeah.
And then you've got covenant issues.
Issues with the prophets.
And false prophets, yeah. So you
The
got
king.
and the king, yeah. You get these blocks of section where it's maybe a sermon or a talk from Jeremiah, then a bunch of poetry, prophecy, and back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the short.
Fantastic.
A short kind of.
So that's kind of in chapters 1 to 24.
In that section.
Those
1 to
sections
24.
there. Yeah. Great.
So
All right, do people have, if you've got any questions about the structure or things like that, throw them in the chat. And what we'll try to do from here on, did you have other things? You wanted to bring a little bit of history into the mix here.
No, I don't think too much to add from what we looked at from the Kings.
Okay.
So Assyria's gone. Worth knowing that Egypt is on the way out as well. Egypt is still strong and had a win against Babylon, I think, in about 620 or something like that. But it's on the way out. But Jerusalem's kind of caught between the two empires, and it's looking for support from Egypt. In hindsight, that was a bad idea, but they thought something was going on. But then, Babylon defeated Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish in 605.
Yeah, right.
At the top of the Euphrates.
Yep.
And after that was all over. So
It's all over. It's interesting that this region, well, your map's not there anymore, but that region it's been war torn
yeah,
for centuries.
Well, it's like the crossroads between
Centuries,
two continents, or three continents, potentially, Europe, Asia, Africa.
And still is war.
Still is, yeah. And Jerusalem's stuck in the middle there.
Yeah. All right. Well, what we'll do is we've got a few questions here that have been sent to us previously, and I'm going to keep my eye on the chat here. Josh Griffiths has asked, why is the king of Babylon referred to as my servant by God?
Yeah.
So that's interesting, isn't it? Chapter 25, verse 9, if you're looking for that reference.
Yes, 25
So
verse
obviously
9.
Josh has been reading on ahead.
25 verse 9, we should read it. This is in the Hinge chapter, chapter 25. Therefore, verse 8, therefore the Lord Almighty says this, because you have not listened to my words, I will summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, declares the Lord, and I'll bring them against this land and its inhabitants and against all the surrounding nations. Great question. Do you want to have a go at answering?
No, it's all yours, mate.
Okay.
This one.
It's really interesting because you think servant, does that mean that Nebuchadnezzar has a relationship with God? Is he a believer in Yahweh? And that's possible, but I think for the purposes of what's going on in Jeremiah, he's God's almost, you could say, unwitting servant.
Yeah.
He's a servant in the sense he's doing what God wants him to do, which is bring judgment against Israel. There's a parallel, a similar thing. I might get
In Isaiah.
Isaiah 10 verse 15. Oh, did you have that ready to go? Dan, are you able to bring up Isaiah 10, 15? On easy worship, if that's working. So this is in reference to Assyria, which, is the guys beforehand, the tower beforehand, is Isaiah 10, 15. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it, as if a rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who is not wood? So that's, I think, in reference to, if you look back to 10 verse 12, that's the king of Assyria. So he's been compared to an axe that's being used by God to do a job. And that's the sense, I think, in which Nebuchadnezzar is a servant of God. Although there's a bit in Daniel where he acknowledges God as... Yeah, but that's not
but
necessarily...
then it kind of goes back and forth a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you've also got Cyrus in Isaiah.
Yeah, that's right.
So in Isaiah 44, Isaiah 44 verse 28 there, Dan. So Cyrus was the king of Persia, and it says, he is my shepherd.
Yeah.
And I will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. And so Cyrus comes in, and it's talking here. It's almost talking about Cyrus in the same kind of language that talks about the servant of the Lord or the servant of Isaiah, the suffering servant.
Yeah. It's sort of like a teaser. Is it Cyrus? But
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So Nebuchadnezzar is a servant but unwilling, and pretty nasty character all up.
Cool. All right. In Jeremiah chapter 25, again, verse 18, Jeremiah warns that the cup of God's wrath will bring about the ruins of the people and the towns of Judah as they are today. Does this tell us when the book of Jeremiah was written? If so, when was the book of Jeremiah written?
Yeah. So, thanks for this question. It's great picking up details. Here we are in the Hinge chapter again, chapter 25, verse 18. But that phrase, as they are today, that sounds like as this is being written, there's ruin there. So this is already dated for us. It's the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, which is on our dates there about 600 something. But we know by this stage there's plenty of Jeremiah has been written. There's an interesting section in Jeremiah 36, which is also the 4th year of Jehoiakim. So Jeremiah 36, so a lot happened in that year. when there's a whole scroll of Jehoiakim's writings written, and King Jehoiakim reads them, and as he reads them, burns them and puts them in the fire. So,
Yeah, right. So that's in chapter 36.
yeah, chapter 36.
Yeah.
So we know definitely by the 4th year of Jehoiakim, there's a bunch of Jeremiah's scroll has been written. And so coming back to 25.
Just so shows you how far the kings had drifted from God.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to when we preach and teach on that.
Yeah.
He's literally sitting there in his palace, just
Chopping it up,
chucking it in the fire. Yeah. That's not a good attitude to have to God's
word.
And things ended badly for Jehoiakim. But 25 does sound like Jerusalem's at a point of ruin in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, which I think probably Jehoiakim was kind of beholden to Egypt at that time. He'd been put there by Egypt because, we've lost our table, haven't we? Josiah was killed by the Egyptians. His son, Jehoahaz, was displaced by the Egyptians. They didn't want him, so they put in Jehoiakim.
Yeah.
So he's kind of beholden they're paying a lot of tax to Egypt.
Yep.
They don't have sovereignty. So they're not probably destitute and destroyed, ruined like after the Babylonians, but they're a pretty sad state.
Sad state of affairs at the moment. Yeah. All right. Cool. We've got a question here from Giselle.
Yeah.
Why are there two accounts of the fall of Jerusalem? So chapter 39.
Oh, yeah, great.
And then chapter 52. So it's like some kind of literary device that...
Let's have a look. Chapter 39 is the fall of Jerusalem, and this is part of that narrative section in the second half of Jeremiah, after the words of hope in 30:31 about the new covenant, and before the oracles to the nations, where it's spelled out this fall of Jerusalem. And that's the narrative there. Jerusalem falls, and you've got 41, 42, where Jeremiah is sort of stuck with a remnant of people who head off to Egypt. And so, that in there is sort of climaxing his all the warnings to Jehoiakim, all the warnings to Zedekiah. Everything he said came true in chapter 39. But then if you come right to the end of 52, that's kind of the fall of Jerusalem there is functioning, I think, kind of like a closing epilogue to the book. You'll see in 51 verse 64 it says the words of Jeremiah end here, as if to say, I don't know, the main bulk of Jeremiah's words have ended here, and then it's 52 is runs through that fall, but leading up, I think, particularly into Jehoiakim, is that just this little hint of hope that there is someone from the line of David eating at the king's table. And so, and Jeremiah has said the hope is in the exiles, it's not in the stayers. So the book closes with lots of ambiguity. What happened to Jeremiah? Is he living or dead? What happened with the people who assassinated Gedaliah? All this sort of stuff. But you've got just Jehoiakim, just kind of like the last hope.
Yeah, so I guess chapter 30, it's not chronological, just kind of... this is very thematic, isn't it?
Yeah.
This back half of the book. So it's not that chapter 39 happened and then they restated it and there's some kind of issue with dating. But there's a close at the end of chapter 39 and then the close of the whole book. Yeah. Does that mean there was a scribe or somebody who compiled some of this work? Yeah,
definitely. We know, this is interesting, Jeremiah, we've got this guy Baruch. Who's functions as a scribe. Sam, can you bring up the Baruch verses for the screen that we could look at?
Chapter 32?
Chapter 32, appears more in the second half. And
have a look at 12 to 16, chapter 32.
Yeah. So he was like, a friend, a servant of Jeremiah, and wrote stuff down. And there's a particular one, in 36, when chapter 36, when Jehoiakim burns Jeremiah's scroll, verse 32, Jeremiah took another scroll and gave it to the scribe Baruch, son of Neriah, and as Jeremiah dictated, Baruch wrote on it all the words of the scroll that Jehoiakim, king of Judah, had burned in the fire, and many similar words were added to them. Right. So definitely he's got a team of helpers.
He's got a little team. Jeremiah's team of scribes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Maybe that was the maturity team of Jerusalem at the time.
Maturity team.
Fantastic.
The maturity team had a big fail in the history of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They were letting the side down.
There's a question here from Tony who says, when did Jerusalem first fall to Babylon and then Jerusalem get taken into captivities? Sorry, then Jeremiah get taken into captivity.
Read that again.
When did Jerusalem first fall to Babylon and then Jeremiah get taken into captivity?
Yeah, so Jerusalem first fell to Babylon in 597.
Yep.
I think it's not
So it's
100%
the
clear, but
first deportation.
yeah, they kind of stopped paying their taxes,
Yep.
and that's a very bad thing to do for Babylon.
Yep.
And they came and give them a big smackdown. It wasn't a complete demolition, because if you smack them down, you can still get your taxes next year. So just
It's a fair point.
a smackdown. That was the end of Jehoiakim. But Jeremiah had been in jail, I think, under Jehoiakim's rule and Zedekiah's rule.
Yep.
So I can't quite remember when he was in the pit and so on. So he was definitely having a rough time under both kings.
Yeah.
But then the second deportation, 587, Zedekiah rebelled again, didn't pay his taxes, and this time Babylon had enough, and they
Took them all into
took them all, burned down the temple, and at that point, you can read it, Jeremiah has the option of going to Babylon if he wants. They treat him quite well, the Babylonians, but he chooses to stay with the guys in Jerusalem. Well, the region, Jerusalem
The
was,
region of
was
Jerusalem.
virtually uninhabited. It was just a shell.
It's a bit like I Am Legend.
I haven't seen it. Is that like a zombie
It's a
movie?
Will Smith movie, and he's like in this deserted city, just him and
Yeah.
a dog, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. There was, Jerusalem, there was just a few random poor people,
Hanging around.
homeless people hanging around.
Cool.
Maybe
All right.
zombies.
Now, there's a few more questions that we've got here. On Sunday night, there was a question here
Yeah, this
from
is
my
for you.
talk. Let me just get it here. Where there was questions raised around the issues of God's sovereignty and prophecy. And so the person who sent in the question had quite a long kind of statement to say. They said God has the sovereign right to change his mind and not unfold the disaster he promised. But Numbers 23:19, they said, seems to imply that God would not change his mind. So there's this question of, does God change his mind? And there's a couple of things that we want to say, and then we'll read a quote to you in a moment or two. But I guess the danger of talking about the idea of God changing his mind is that you end up with what's called open theism. Now, open theism, you're not an open theist.
No.
So open theism is the idea that God does not know what humans will freely choose to do, and so therefore he's affected by our actions, not knowing the future.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of got a vague plan mapped out, but it's very changeable it's malleable according to the way that humanity responds to his unfolding plans.
He can change himself.
Yeah, that's right. And he himself can change. So you want to avoid that. The other danger I think that you want to avoid is God's sovereignty. The idea of God's sovereignty and human responsibility, you've got to keep those two things in tension. And so God's sovereignty is not the same as fatalism or determinism. Okay, so fatalism and determinism is the idea that everything is set in kind of one event leads to the next event, to the next event, to the next event, and it's
like in concrete.
It's in concrete.
There's nothing you can do.
That's right. It's quite a dark worldview, really.
Yeah.
Very dark. So you want to avoid those two extremes. And then you also want to uphold the immutability of God. Okay, so this idea that God does not change. So if, Dan, can you bring up Malachi chapter 3, verse 6? This is the classic one. It says, I, the Lord, do not change. Doesn't get much
Yeah.
simpler than that.
Yeah.
And then we actually see in his name, so when God reveals himself in the book of Exodus to Moses, Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, so he's at the burning bush, he says, I am who I am.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we can actually trust the promises that God gives to us. And that's really the point of Hebrews chapter 6. Come with me to Hebrews chapter 6, verse 17 and 18. Oh, I can never find Hebrews. I always get lost at this part of the Bible.
You overshoot.
Overshoot. Hebrews 6.